Welcome to Simply Sarah. I'm Sarah Stock. I'm your host, and I am so glad that you are here. I happen to think that hope is one of the most powerful things that we can experience. And I don't know about you, but now that I'm 60, I'm thinking about my brain differently, and I'm noticing some changes and differences. And part of that's been because we relocated 2 years ago and figuring out a new place. But I have been wondering a little bit about how much of this possibly could because of aging. And as I said, hope is an incredibly powerful thing. And today we're going to share hope with you about brain aging and that we can be proactive in that space. Before we get started with this incredible conversation, we're going to say thank you real quickly to a number of different people who have been so supportive. One of them is you for being here and listening in. Thank you so much. Also for E360 TV for providing the platform. And then for Amano Art and for the work that they are doing with the art of forgiving, for the Stegner family, and also for Katie Ingersoll. And so let me bring in Eric Collett, A Mind for All Seasons. Eric, we are so pleased that you carved out time for us to have this conversation. Welcome to Simply Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah. It's a pleasure to be here.
So your company is called A Mind for All Seasons, and I just so love that title. I would love for you to share part of your background story, Eric, of how you got to where you are today, because it wasn't necessarily a straight road.
No, definitely not. I think a lot of us get to midlife and we look back and say, wow, I never could have predicted that. But
Right.
my mom called it a long time ago. I remember being a teenager and a little bit distressed about what I was going to do with the rest of my life. And she sat me down one day and she said, Eric, I have a strong feeling that the job that you will do has not even been invented yet. So don't worry about it. Just let things unfold. Try to make good decisions today and keep
Mm,
moving forward. That was great advice.
yes.
So, kind of to condense the story, after I got done with my formal education, I stumbled into a career in assisted living and memory care that lasted for 16 years, even though I thought it was a temporary thing that I was going to do until I found my real job. And instead, I found myself. And I revisited something that I had been interested in since high school, which was understanding degenerative diseases of the brain, like Alzheimer's. And I found myself working in a bit of a laboratory, trying different things, paying attention to what was working and what wasn't. And after 16 years in that space, I really felt inspired to strike out on my own and start A Mind for All Seasons. So I did that 9 years ago. And I never could have predicted what the company would become.
Mm,
About a year into it, I met and joined forces with my business partner, our chief medical officer, Randy Vaudry. And he and I went all in on developing tools and systems and processes and really as far as I know, the world's first organized methodology for figuring out the root causes of cognitive decline for people living in long-term care and
mm.
then helping the professionals serving them assist them to have better results. And that just sort of led to a lot of other things that you and I have talked a little bit about. But let me just pause there because that's kind of a condensed version of what brought me to starting A Mind for All Seasons.
I really appreciate that you were talking about this from your experiences. Also, this beautiful blessing that your mom gave you of expanding for your future, right? How you could be choosing to look at things. I appreciate also knowing that you are a musician, that you were developing your brain through both using the right and left hand as you were playing. And in this space, then you come across some things, begin to notice some pieces, as you say, find yourself inside of working with people who are aging and who may be really struggling with that process, however it was showing up for them of aging. What are some of the things that you have found in your research, also based on the UCLA research that you and your business partner have also leaned into? What are some of the pieces that you have found in there that have been really beneficial for anybody of any age that they can be doing? And then we'll get into more of the specifics of the other after.
Sure. I think the first thing to understand is that really the first thing that caused the lights to go on for me personally to recognize, oh, this is why it's so hard for people after hundreds and hundreds of drug trials in attempts to find a cure for Alzheimer's disease to actually accomplish anything that moves the needle.
Mm.
And the insight is this: brain health is never about one thing. There are many different factors that contribute to how the brain and the body function and work together. Our bodies are systems of systems. And part of how we've wound up in this situation where there are millions of people, over 50 million people worldwide dealing with Alzheimer's disease right now, we've wound up there partly because we've become intoxicated with our own success in certain areas. And we've assumed that, oh, what works in one thing will apply broadly. And that's turned out to be wrong.
Yeah.
So if you're dealing with something like bacterial pneumonia, yeah, there are a lot of variables that determine whether you live or die. But the single biggest variable is the pathogen. And once antibiotics came around in 1927 and later, then we had a powerful tool that really moved the needle on that. But we became intoxicated with the idea that, oh, we need to look for that one pill that will solve this problem and test it against a placebo. And we ignored the fact that some problems are really multifactorial, and brain health is one of them. So here's a quick analogy to kind of frame it for people. Imagine that if your brain health is really good, your mind is sharp, you're aging really gracefully, you're one of those people that gets to 100 and the family says, wow, she's still sharp as a tack.
Right.
That's like a boat that's riding high in the water, moving at top speed. Things are good. But if your brain health is not good, it's kind of like the ship is sinking and you have a sense that, oh my goodness, we're taking on water here.
Mm.
It's easy to think, oh, I've got to find the hole where the water is leaking through and patch that hole. But what if there are over 80 different things that are contributing as potential holes? And let's say that you have 20 on that list of 80 plus.
Mhm.
Well, if you patch one hole, the ship is still sinking. You
Yeah.
might be able to measure that it's going down a little bit slower, but it's still going down. And I think one of the first game-changing insights is that brain health is never about one thing.
Mm.
We've got to look at all the potential factors. We have to pay attention to the individual and have a deep respect that every single human is unique. We
Yeah.
need to look at their unique situation and say, what are the holes that are in the bottom of your boat that's sinking your ship? And let's do something about all of those. So I can add a little bit to the framework as far as some basic things. But what are your thoughts about that
Mm.
analogy that I've thrown out, Sarah?
I think that's so powerful. In fact, I was going to bring up the newsletter that just came out this week where you talk about exactly what you've just shared, this space of being able to look at um, other fields and to see what's working inside of other fields and to understand that it is not just a singularly faceted piece. Yes, it shows up as being in the brain. However, there are so many things that are contributing to the possibility of that being the outcome. But again, the space of hope that that doesn't have to be the outcome. And even if we are someone like me, 60 or older, that there are things that we can still be doing that make such a difference to the brain. And again, that that's not just a one pill kind of a thing. It's a multiple uh, fanged way of looking at uh, aging gracefully. I like how you said that. So I'm completely on board that it's multifaceted, and I'm also on board with the fact that there isn't necessarily going to be a one pill for this particular thing, as there is for some types of pneumonia.
Mhm. Yeah, if you look at the major killers on the planet today, things like heart disease and things like type 2 diabetes that really contribute to all sorts of health problems,
Mhm.
these types of conditions are not simple, one variable kinds of issues. They
Right.
are multifactorial. There are a lot of different risk factors, and it's different when we pay attention to the bigger picture.
Mhm.
And I love how you were alluding to a principle that we talked about in our free newsletter that we put out every week. You were talking about translational medicine. The
Yes.
idea that right now, some researchers get stuck because they quote unquote stay in their lane. and they say, well, I only research the brain from this perspective.
Right.
The translational medicine says, well, what about research that is applicable, that's done in humans where there are really good studies in other areas? Could we translate that into some interventions? So, for example, there's a lot of research in the traumatic brain injury world and
Right.
the post concussion syndrome world about hormonal changes that show up when you injure the brain in that regard.
Mm.
And even though there aren't specific studies about some of the hormonal factors in Alzheimer's disease, there's a lot done in the brain injury space that could translate. And we know it's safe, we know it's deeply impactful. And so, why would we not try it? And part of what my team and I have done is to translate things from other areas of research where there's really solid studies. And we said, well, let's try it in this context. And that's a little bit different approach than how research is sometimes conducted.
I also think it gives the possibility more possibility when you are staying in just in one lane. And I appreciate the people who have done that. I appreciate the people who have figured out certain things for AFib and that kind of thing, and they're able to go in and because they stayed in their lane to do that. I appreciate that. But I so hear what you are saying about let's look at other things, knowing that we will not cause harm, that we will be, that these things have been so positive in helping people who have had either concussions or TBIs or MTBIs, mild traumatic brain injuries, to help them move forward, like taking omega 3s. There have just been so many different pieces of that that have been so positive that we have seen that. And so, why not look at translating, possibly bringing some of that over for people who are open hearted, for people who are willing, who are not looking just for the one magic pill that seems to be elusive in the space of Alzheimer's and brain aging.
Yeah. Um, I think it might be valuable to share a few of the basic things that make a difference for people. Because I think as individuals hear some of those things, they'll naturally think about their own experiences and how some of these things apply. Or they might hear something that they haven't tried that they could try. So I'd love to share some of that.
I would be delighted. Yes, please do.
Um, I I remember a gentleman that came to us several years ago. And this was a man who was in his early 60s, and he had been diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's disease, which means you develop the disease prior to age 65.
Right.
And earlier in life, he was diagnosed by a psychologist as a genius. I don't know if diagnosis is the right term, but it's kind of good news. It's like, hey, you're literally a genius. And he became a highly skilled, highly talented engineer. And at what seemed like the peak of his career, things started falling apart.
Mm,
He began to struggle doing basic calculations. He began to have a really difficult time remembering assignments that he had and fulfilling them.
mm,
And long story short, he lost his job, and his wife realized something is wrong. And so they went to a neurologist who did a battery of tests and said, I'm so sorry, you have early onset Alzheimer's
mm.
disease. And that wasn't good enough. So they went to another neurologist who diagnosed the same thing. And they ended up getting a third opinion. And when that last neurologist said, I'm sorry, you have early onset Alzheimer's, there's nothing I can do. This guy said, well, what do you recommend that I do? Like, I'm still alive. How do I move forward?
Right.
What are my
Right.
choices? And according to this man, the doctor looked at him and just kind of matter of factly said, well, I suggest you get yourself a good attorney because in the next few years, you might not know who your wife is and she needs to have control of your assets or she's not going to be able to arrange for care and do some of these things. Well, he described that as feeling like the doctor just reached across the table and just slapped him across the face. And I understand that. I've heard that from a lot of people.
Mhm.
But fortunately, he had a nephew that knew about A Mind for All Seasons and referred him. And when we started working with him, his memory cognitive test scores were in the eighth percentile. So here's a genius, and he's in the eighth percentile for his age with memory. And his other scores were terrible. As we sorted through things, we found several key factors that are good things for everyone to pay attention to. And they fall into a couple of categories.
Mm.
Uh, One would be lifestyle factors,
Mhm.
and the other would be biomarkers. So, in terms of lifestyle, he was not as physically active as he could have been.
Mhm.
Physical activity is really impactful for brain health because it affects blood flow. And in most Alzheimer's cases, you're not getting good blood flow to the brain. Physical activity improves cardiovascular health overall. And so we need that. It also stimulates a growth hormone for brain cells.
Mhm.
So that's pretty impactful.
Yeah.
We looked at his diet and combined with some biomarkers, which are things you can measure in a blood test, we knew that his sugars were running way too high.
Mm.
And Alzheimer's disease is nicknamed diabetes of the brain.
Mm.
A lot of people with Alzheimer's don't respond very well to insulin signaling, and that's driven by what we eat. And this guy was eating kind of the standard American diet, very high carbohydrate diet. And so his body wasn't responding well to insulin, and it made it very difficult for him to get glucose into his brain cells to be converted into energy. Well, if you don't put gas in the tank, the engine won't run.
Yeah.
So paying attention to what we're eating and making some thoughtful decisions makes a difference.
Mm.
He had a lot of stressors in his life. And when stress goes up, it's important to intentionally counterbalance. And most
Yes.
of us are not intentional about it. We acknowledge, oh, I'm feeling really stressed. But we don't think, oh, what am I doing to raise my counterbalances? What about my breath work? What about some of the things that you talk about regularly, Sarah, that are intentional counterbalances for stress? That
Exactly.
makes such a difference.
Yes.
Um, we looked at this man's dental health. And we could have a whole conversation about how mind blowing the connection is between dental health problems and neurological
Mm.
problems. But we had to tease out some things there with him. We had to look at his sleep and opportunities to optimize his sleep. And then
Mm.
in terms of biomarkers, we looked at everything from B vitamins to magnesium and selenium and other key nutrients. We looked at a lot of hormones. His testosterone levels were not at all where they should be. The master hormone for his brain, pregnenolone, wasn't at all where it should be. So we sorted through all of these different lifestyle and biomarker factors, and we made recommendations for him in all of those areas. So we
Mm.
got him exercising more, we got him sleeping better, we got him focused on what he was eating and improving his diet. He supplemented some things that he was really deficient in. And
Okay.
4 months later, his memory scores went from the 8th percentile to the 91st percentile. And this is on a very
Remarkable.
objective cognitive test. This is a computer based test that a lot of research institutions use. It's been administered over 20 million times in the last 2 decades. So there's a lot of data points to compare to. And things totally shifted for this man. And it's not that he doesn't still have early onset Alzheimer's disease, he absolutely does. But it changed the trajectory. He's living a very different kind of life. And now, 4 years later, he's still driving, he's still living independently. He's actually out on a mission trip for his church, which was a lifelong dream of his. And there's more to that story, but I think that one case illustrates not only what we've done with thousands of people, but what our listeners here can really pay attention to, which is, well, what about my lifestyle factors? Am I being intentional in those areas? And how much do I know about different biomarkers? So I'll pause there because that's kind of a long-winded response. But what are your thoughts about that? What have you seen in some of your experiences?
I have heard this connection between dental and brain for a long, long, long time. And it is something that when I was a classroom teacher, one of the things that uh, was I don't want to say experiment, but that we were provided in the classroom with toothbrushes for all the kids. And they didn't use toothpaste. They just came in after lunch and every child would brush their teeth. And then we had stuff that we would, scope kind of stuff would spray on all the toothbrushes, which may sound really gross to some people. However, the place that I was teaching had a huge propensity for children having never gone to see a dentist and be school age. And so this was one of the pieces of how can we help out, at least doing something minimally. And so I've been intrigued by that understanding that dental health and brain health and learning and all those pieces are somehow have it's that cogwheel, right? All the pieces fit together. And so absolutely have been aware of that. I also really appreciate you touching on sleep. I think that that's one of the things that some people choose to stay up because they are anxious. And so if they will stay up until they fall asleep in their chair or whatever, and then, or get to bed or maybe just sleep in the chair, I think that dealing with the underlying anxiety or why can't you sleep? And I know for myself today, I didn't get out for my walk as long as I wanted to this morning. And I have been just a little bit aware of that and have been thinking about, do I go ahead and finish the walk before I get to bed tonight, or do I try to kind of get through the night, right? Because for me, exercise has a beautiful piece of that deep slumber that is so restful in nature. And how important is that for me, right? I get to make those decisions, that space of agency. And I think that that's what part of this conversation just gives me so much excitement and hope about, is the amount of agency that we do have about our brain when we look at what are we choosing to eat, not from the standpoint of is it good for you or bad for you, but does this help you move your uh, how you want to be living when you were in your 80s and 90s? Does this move it forward toward that? So we're taking away, for me, taking away the good bad kind of piece, more of the goal, looking at the goal part of it, right? Making decisions based on things that we desire in the future rather than things that perhaps we've been told in the past that this is good for you or bad for you, do or don't do. I think that if we have a goal or something that we are working towards, that can be so much stronger for our full being to be able to move towards that. So we're going to get a quick break here. We're going to come back right after this to continue this conversation.
This is Michelle. She teaches women how to forgive the people who betrayed them, not by asking them to talk about it, but by helping them express it through art. She's an art therapist and the creator of The Art of Forgiving, a class that turns emotion into expression. No therapy jargon, no pressure to explain, because forgiveness isn't about the other person. It's about setting yourself free. This is Michelle, and this is The Art of Forgiving.
Are you ready to enrich and deepen your relationship with the spirit world and increase your knowledge of the shamanic journey? Then this is for you. The first step of the shamanic journey is to discover your power animal. This process allows you to step into Spirit's energetic field where they share their aspect of the divine's power. And as a result, you begin to realize the significance of their sacred power and what it means to you personally. Katie Ingersoll is a highly sought shamanic and Reiki teacher, a practitioner, a spiritual counselor, and educator. With grace, she integrates the rich teachings of the wise ancient ones into her workshops, encouraging her students to mesh these teachings into their everyday lives. For details of how you can discover your power animal, reach out to Katie at katieingersoll@gmail.com. You can also find her as a qualified teacher and practitioner on Sandra Ingerman's shamanicteachers.com. Katie Ingersoll's classes and workshops are fresh, unique, fun, and informative. Ready to deepen your shamanic understanding? Reach out today. Eric, I am loving this conversation because you are helping me and our audience to listen to not just the words that you are saying, but to immediately begin to apply them to where we are in our life and what we desire in the future. And I think that's one of the things that when a doctor says, this is as good as it's going to get, put your affairs in order. I haven't had that experience of someone telling me that, but what I have heard from other people is just how demeaning and small making it makes the person feel about their future. It makes it feel very, just very tiny. And I understand that those words have meaning to them about, yes, make sure that you have somebody who can help your spouse in the future make the decisions that need to be made for your care and that kind of thing. But I also really appreciate that this person that you were talking about's nephew had heard about A Mind for All Seasons and that he took the next step after going to 3 different specialists who said, yeah, this is it. And for you guys to be able to say, we don't have the cure, but we have an answer that can absolutely radically change your life. For him to be driving 4 years later is phenomenal, Eric. And that, I think, is a powerful piece that can give people so much hope. In this space, I would love for you to share more, as you have been, about things that people can be looking at or thinking about, or how loved ones of somebody who has a diagnosis can be coming in to support in such a way that it's a safety net that's encouraging and continues to lead the conversation forward.
Yeah, there's so much that we can talk about. You said some things right before the break that I think are important to respond to. I think they'll help people individually. And I want to frame the conversation this way. One of the worst things that I hear from people is they say, Eric, I love what you're doing, and I hope I never need your services. And I think, oh, I have failed. I have completely failed. Because although there isn't a cure for Alzheimer's disease right now, or a lot of other really serious neurodegenerative conditions, we now know that Alzheimer's disease is largely preventable. And all of us have a brain. We all need to be taking care of it. And this really ties into something that you said earlier that I want to add just a little bit of nuance to. You were talking about what we eat, and you were mentioning that when we understand our long-term goals, that it makes a difference, that it's easier to make choices today. There's a risk to that, though. Although I agree that having a really good long-term vision of where we want to go is critical, our human tendency is to just be reactive to things in the moment. And the human condition is partly about drift. So many of us don't fall off our goals. We just drift away from our goals. And I think part of what helps any of us get better results is to combine the long-term view of what an optimal life looks like and what we want the end of our journey to look like, to the extent that we have some control. But combine that with making decisions about our goals today. So one of the things that we do when we're teaching people how to eat is, number one, not everybody needs to eat in exactly the same way. Anyone that thinks there's one diet for humans, I think, is probably a little naive and may need to study physiology a little bit more, because we're all different.
Yes.
But a good question to ask every time we eat is, okay, given the fact that food is fuel, what is my goal right now? How am I trying to run the engine? And asking that question causes me to eat very differently during a workday than I do in the evening or than I do on the weekend. So, for example, during the workday, I want my sugars to run really steady,
Yeah.
and I want to prioritize burning fat as a fuel source because it's actually more efficient. And for me, my brain just flat functions better, and I
Yeah.
can measure it. But on Saturday mornings, it's really common that I'll get up and run 5 to 7 miles and come back and lift weights for an hour. And after that, I need a real recovery meal. And the goal at that point is different. My goal there is recovery and building muscle. And to build muscle, you need an insulin response and you need protein, which is the building block of muscle. So I might eat a meal that has 3 or 4 scrambled eggs, and I might have some black rice, or I might eat an apple and some other fruits so that I'm stimulating an insulin response and I'm getting a lot of protein. And I feel really good when I do that right after a workout. Now, if I eat that way for breakfast on a work day, I feel lousy because my sugars rise and then they come back down and I just feel a little bit sluggish and unsteady, and it doesn't serve my goal as well. So that's one thing that I would add to the earlier discussion. You
Mm,
also talked about your own experience today with exercise, that you didn't get your whole walk in earlier. And
right.
so you're kind of debating, okay, what are my goals? What do I want to do? What's going to optimize my sleep? And I think there's an important principle that frequently gets overlooked because a
Mm,
lot of people struggle with things like physical activity. We all know it's good for us,
mm,
but people have a hard time fitting it in. And even when you get up and you exercise first thing for 30 to 45 minutes, maybe even 60 minutes, if you're sitting the rest of the day, there's actually a problem with that.
right.
I kind of jokingly call that being an active couch potato, because the longer you sit, the more your sensitivity to hormones like insulin starts to diminish, and the
Mm,
more you start to develop some metabolic issues where the cells aren't functioning as well as they could. And what's better for humans is to recognize that our bodies were first and foremost meant to move.
yes.
And movement should be the rule, sitting should be more of the exception.
Mm,
So here's a way to leverage that. Yes, it's amazing to get up and to work out first thing in the morning. And I really prioritize that in my own life. But what moves the needle even more than that is consistent exercise snacking. So once an hour, if you just take a 3 to 5 minute break and you jump a fake rope,
mhm,
or you do jumping jacks, or you do 20 push ups, or you do some air squats, or you go walk around the building a few times, or you go up and down stairs, or just add to the list. There's an almost limitless supply of things that you could do to move your body and put your bones under a little bit of a load or get your heart rate up a little bit. I have a
mhm,
spin bike just a few feet from me in my office here, because in between things, it's common that I will jump on that bike and I'll crank away hard for 5 to 10 minutes,
mm,
and it gets my heart rate up in the middle of the day, and then I just go right back to my work. That can make a huge difference for people, and it's often
mm,
easier to do than being ultra consistent in a 30 to 60 minute workout first thing in the morning.
mm.
So maybe just add in some exercise snacks.
I love the concept of exercise snacks, and I will say that before I came and sat down for this, that I was doing some of the things that you were talking about because I'd been sitting and reading and really working on pulling in the knowledge from this particular book. And I thought, I need to move before I sit down over here, right, to come do this time. So I love the idea of the snacking part of exercise snacks. And I think also that idea of having something that's close by that you can do so easily is such a powerful piece because it's a reminder it's right there for you to be able to jump on the bike and be able to do. And it's something that you can do no matter the weather outside, which is something that I have found having relocated from a place where the weather was really quite the same, very, very consistent, to a place that has definitely four seasons, figuring out that part of it as well. And I think also the space of when we raise our heart rate. I have a sister who's a registered dietitian. She talks about how that just blasts all the cholesterol out of our heart, right? Just gets everything moving it. And so that whole space also of when we move the blood, it's not just for our brain and reoxygenating that, it's good for other parts of our body, and that we are a whole system that has multiple systems inside of it. And so it's good for all the different systems to be able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think if people are listening to this thinking, oh, yeah, if I develop symptoms, then, oh, I'm glad there are things that I can do about it. Then we're maybe missing the boat a little bit. But I understand that mindset because that comes from living and growing up in a sick care system where the model literally is you live your life, you do whatever you're doing, and if you develop some sort of symptom or another, you go to the doctor's office and hope that he or she has an answer for you.
Right.
And if you're involved in something that is an acute illness or an infection, or you have an accident or something, well, thank heavens we can go to the emergency department and get microvascular surgery when we get into a terrible car accident or something like that. But I think to live well and to truly change the trajectory
Mm,
and to optimize our results today, we need to focus on these lifestyle factors and optimizing biomarkers and leveraging the research that's just exploded in the last 10 years. I see this all the time with some of the professionals that I work with. I have business leaders now who recognize, hey, my brain is my tool in this knowledge economy, and I want it to be as sharp as humanly possible. Well, when you comb through everything that affects the brain health, at least insofar as we understand it and can measure things now, when you comb through that and you figure out what are the holes that are not necessarily sinking your ship because you're functional, but what's affecting it? What has it riding a little bit lower in the water than would be optimal? When you change those things in a matter of 3 or 4 months, I see business leaders whose cognitive scores go up 30 to 40%. And a few years ago, I had a realization that our brains are a little bit like computer hardware. And all of the skills that we gain, the books that we read, the shows that we listen to, the insights that we're trying to gain, that's kind of like software. And everybody knows what happens when you load new software onto an old computer system. It never works as well. And in our bodies, in our brains, the same is true. If we're not taking really good care of the hardware, then when we learn new skills, it's not that it doesn't make a difference. I think it often makes a difference, but it could make so much more of a difference if we were really paying attention to our brain health today. And when you combine that with the fact that diseases like Alzheimer's literally start, the pathology is there 20 or more years before symptoms even show up, then you have a really compelling reason to think every day about what am I doing to optimize my brain health. And I think that's an important shift that needs to take place for all of us in how we live our lives and what we think about on a daily basis.
Eric, are there tests that people can take in that 20-year span before they begin showing signs that let them know where they are inside of that? Have we gotten to that point yet with our testing?
Absolutely. It's something that my team and I do every day. We've done it for thousands of people across the country. And it's fascinating to see what shows up when you do that. So in a regular primary care visit, your doctor will probably look at a complete blood count, a comprehensive metabolic panel, and maybe a handful of other things. But there are a lot of other factors that we can measure. When you understand things like how cells function and all the different cofactors that have to be present, then you start to understand how important it is to actually measure those things. And when you understand the role that different genetic tendencies play, well, measuring some genetics actually becomes actionable. If you know something about your genetics, then you know something about the strength side of those genetics and the weak side. And understanding that allows you to make choices today that can mitigate the weak side. And this is hard to do for people. It's a simple principle, but it's hard for people for the same reason that avoiding sodas is hard. Everybody knows that if you drink one sugary beverage, it's not going to ruin your life. Anybody can drink one can of soda or whatever sugary beverage you choose, and it's not going to wreck your life. But if you do that multiple times a day, every day for the next 3 decades, I promise you it will destroy you metabolically.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it so hard, because there are a lot of things in our lives where doing it once doesn't make that big of a difference. But doing it consistently over time makes a huge difference. So think of exercise, for example. You talked about your walk this morning. Walking is one of the easiest, most impactful, positive things that we can do for our health. And yet it's easy to stay home because skipping exercise once won't wreck your life. Everybody has skipped exercise for a 24-hour period. We've all done it, and there have been no negative side effects. But it adds up over time. So we're talking about the compound effect of our choices. And that's a lot harder to stay focused on because of our human tendencies.
Easy to do, easy not to do. Coming back to the idea of the blood tests, then do people have to come to you, or are you able to ship, or how do people get that information?
That's a great question. And if it's okay with you, I can point people to a free resource that we put together that would help them
Yes.
know what to check.
Yes.
About, oh, I don't know, a month or two ago, I was talking to someone who said it would be really nice if there was just a questionnaire that I could go through to help me understand what kind of decisions that I'm making, and to maybe take blood work that I've already had done and look at it and see, okay, what have I done and what am I missing on the list? And I thought that is a really good idea.
Yes.
And so my team and I jumped into action, and in an afternoon, we made that. And so there's a free questionnaire that anybody can take. If you go to amindforallseasons.com/energy, you can take a simple self assessment that will ask you questions about lifestyle. It will ask you questions about any symptoms that you may have related to your brain health. And then it will ask you to fill in what you know about certain biomarkers, things that are measurable in a blood test. So let's say that you went to your primary care doctor within the last few months. You could, while you're taking that questionnaire, you could fill out the things that you know, but then you would probably see a long list of tests where you'll say, oh, I don't know, because that hasn't been checked. And that alone will tell you the kinds of things to be looking at. And whether you go to Quest Diagnostics and you pay yourself to get some of the tests done, or you reach out to us at Mind for All Seasons, or you talk to your doctor about it, there are lots of ways to get stuff done. And we even give you the ranges that would be optimal for human health.
Are you able to do a saliva test also, or is it only blood?
Well, certainly some things can be tested in saliva, but a lot of these markers need specific tests that can only be done with a blood test.
Yeah. Fabulous. Thank you so much for making that available. And I love that it's /energy, because that's what we are, right? We are energy beings, and we want the energy to shine brighter. And we want to be using all the gifts that we have for the best, for the fullest. I think of that parable of, having a light and then putting it underneath something so nobody can see it. And I do feel like at times there are actions or activities or things that we can be doing to cloak over, right? And that part of this conversation is that uncloaking of, here we are, how can we do this at our very best for as long as we possibly can? I was talking to somebody a couple days ago who said, I don't ever plan to retire. And I hear what she's saying, and I don't think that she ever will retire. She loves what she does, and it keeps her in that space of creating things, and keeps her in conversations with people, and allows her to look back on other conversations and things that she has ways that she's helped other people, and to be able to share those stories then with the next people that she's talking with as she's coaching and helping them. And I just thought, yeah. And I think that also, Eric, is one of the things that perhaps society has said, this is how long you're supposed to work, and then you're supposed to be done. And what does done mean? I know of somebody that I taught with for years that the day that her husband retired, he died. Mm-hmm. And that what comes next is a big thing. And I think that as we open up our minds to think about what are we doing for now, work-wise, but also what kind of life do we want to be having? What does that look like? And to not be afraid of asking those kinds of questions. I think that part of the reason of not asking is the fear of disappointment. What if I want this one thing and I don't get it? And so I think that words are really important when we write down the things that we want. I recently wrote down that I was in my prayer journal about a very specific thing, and then I got a little bit more information. I went, oh, I didn't make my prayer specific enough. Now, just to be clear, this is my conversation with God, right? This is what I'm asking for. I want to be clear about that. I'm not saying that this is how it has to happen in order for me to believe that there is a being out there who loves and cares for me. But I just thought it's really important for me to be careful about the words that I'm using, to not be careless in that. And as I look at my future, also to be careful in the words that I'm choosing with that. I believe that words can be life-giving, not just our internal conversation, but also our external conversations as well. Have you found any correlation between people's outlook on life and that impact on their brain?
Absolutely. In fact, as you were talking about people retiring and dying shortly thereafter, even in the case that you shared the day of, I couldn't help but think of all the many times throughout the last 25 years I've seen people who retired after a very stress-filled career where they really didn't have any sense of counterbalancing that stress. It was just go, go, go. And the narrative that people told themselves was, well, I'll rest later. I'll take a break later. I'll put this off. I have to do all this work now,
Mhm.
and then I get to rest. And they never really got much of a chance because within just a few years, they declined so rapidly that they found themselves in some sort of a long-term care setting. I think of one of the first women that I ever took care of when I was in working in assisted living. Her name was Mary, and Mary was morbidly obese, and she wasn't able to really move around a lot. And she had some health problems that were contributing to that with fluid retention and so forth. And she had lived a pretty active life, but just because she couldn't move around didn't mean that she couldn't be mentally and socially active. And so she actually had a newsletter that she sent out to over 250 people every month. And I'll never forget her telling me about her newsletter when I was a new team member there and asking if I wanted to be on it. And then seeing the work that she put into that to choose a theme every month and to investigate different quotes or insights that she could put into it, painstakingly handwriting this, and then shipping it off to a daughter in Colorado who would type it up, who would then ship it to another daughter who would make copies and mail it out to this mailing list. There was quite the production. But Mary looked at me the first day I met her, and she repeated this often. She would hold up her crooked arthritic finger and she'd say, Eric, you remember, to rest is to rust. And I've never forgotten that. And I think there's a lot of truth in the principle that we need to stay in motion in life. And even you look at the research with degenerative diseases, people who have purpose, people who stay socially connected, people who have something to get up for every day tend to do better.
Yes.
I'm not saying that that alone is a cure. It's not. But it's one of the holes in the boat. And if we can stay engaged, if we can have meaning and purpose, if we can have a reason to get out of bed in the morning, I deeply believe that that makes a difference for us.
And I think one of the gifts of technology that maybe we discovered a few years ago on a different level was that if you don't have your own tribe in your town, that you can find them online. People who like the same kind of books that you do, or the same kind of music, or who are interested in similar kinds of things. And I think that that place of being socially active, yes, it can mean, it used to mean square dances, right? That kind of thing, and ice cream socials, but now it can mean other ways of being connected in with others, being concerned about others, being in conversation with others, and listening, not just having to share what our thoughts are, but that space of being able to hear what the other person has to say, and whether we agree with it or not, to honor the person because that's where they are in their journey. I think is such a good place to be, a heart open place to be.
Yeah. You talked about words earlier, Sarah, and you mentioned that you like the word energy. When I told people about the brain energy self-assessment, you said, well, we're beings of energy. I agree with that. And one of the reasons why we chose that word energy and we're intentional about it is that what a lot of people don't understand is that if you have a mental health symptom, it's a symptom of an energy deficit. If you
Yes.
have a cognitive health symptom, it's an energetics problem. Fundamentally, in things like Alzheimer's disease, if you do a PET scan, you see super low energy output in certain regions of the brain.
Right.
And once people learn to see this, then it becomes easier to ask the questions, well, what's contributing to my low energy? So, for example, my team and I have been blessed to serve a number of NFL athletes.
Mm-hmm.
some that were Super Bowl winners way back when. And now they have symptoms like they go from zero to fighting mad, bam, just at the drop of a hat, or they're easily overwhelmed, or they have a hard time planning out their day, or
Mhm.
they need someone else to kind of figure out their schedule because just the mental effort of sequencing tasks is really difficult. Well, those are all symptoms of very low energy in the front part of the brain.
Mm.
Well, go figure that a football player would have chronic inflammation in the frontal lobe that
Right.
would show up as super low energy output, and you would get these mental health symptoms. But when you ask the questions, well, what's contributing to that? And what could we do? Then it leads to a lot of actionable strategies. And I've watched those same football players improve their cognitive scores dramatically and shift out of having a mental health diagnosis to functioning normally again, because when you get the energy back up,
Mhm.
things work the way that they were designed. And that makes a huge difference for people. So here's a takeaway that took me 20 years to discover. And I wish that I could say I discovered it myself. It was one of our clients that actually pointed it out. I will never forget working with this young woman who came to us because her dad called me one Saturday morning, just in tears, saying, "You have to help." I said, "What
Mm.
is wrong?" And this was a friend. "My daughter's suicidal. We
Mm.
found her standing on top of a 14-story building, thinking about jumping off. I mean, this is horrific." And we're talking about a girl who's a straight A student.
Mm.
She played played two instruments, played three sports. She had a CV that looked amazing. Came from a very stable two-parent household. Income was no sort of problem. She didn't have any adverse childhood events that you could point to. No major risk factors. Why was she so depressed? Well, we sorted through all these root cause issues, found that she had lots of concussive injuries from playing lacrosse and rugby that she had never been properly diagnosed with. There was a
Mm.
lot of hormonal wonkiness. She had herpes simplex virus that would
Mhm.
flare and cause symptoms. So there was a lot going on. But as she started getting to a better place, she
Mhm.
still, until we figured it all out, she still had times where she would cycle a little bit. And
Mhm.
I'll never forget the call with her where she was having a tougher week in terms of her symptoms, but she was handling it much better than I'd ever
Mm.
seen her handle it. And I called that out and I said, "I noticed that even though you're not feeling as good,
Mhm.
you don't seem as rattled by it as you were months ago when we started this journey. What has changed?" And she thought for a minute, and then she said something so deeply impactful, and it's changed the way that I serve people. She said, "Eric, I learned not to confuse what I feel with who I am. They're two different things." She said, "I realize now that what I'm feeling is just a symptom.
Mhm.
I know what it's like to be on the other side of that. I know what it's like to feel well.
Mm.
And now I recognize this is just a symptom of my physiology. And even though it's frustrating and I don't have to like it 1 minute,
Right.
I'm not confusing it with my identity. Who I
Mm.
am is totally different. And we can figure out the symptom part. Let's just stick with it and let's keep moving forward." And for a young woman that was scarcely 20 at that time, to have that level of insight was so impressive to me.
Mm.
But it changed the way that I view all of these challenges. Don't confuse how you feel with who you are.
I'm just soaking that in, Eric, because it's so profound. It also takes the label and says, this doesn't have to be who I say that I am. This is something that someone else has said about me, and that I am choosing to move forward in a different way. Um, Maybe that fits for this, maybe not. Um,
Yeah, I think when it comes to emotion, um, we've done ourselves a disservice as a society by talking about a mental health care system and a healthcare system,
right.
as if you kind of can cut things off at the next.
Yeah.
I think everything that we're dealing with when it comes to emotion
Mhm.
is physiological. We have emotion because we have bodies. We have
Yeah.
emotion because we have neurotransmitters and hormones and things that allow us to feel, which
Yes.
is why if someone takes an antidepressant that dulls them and they have a difficult time feeling anything. Sometimes people just discontinue the med because they'd rather feel bad than feel zero.
Right.
And when we learn to view things as just symptoms of our physiology,
Mm-hmm.
I think it allows us to get to a better place. And I would sum up the better place as far as our relationship with emotions in this way. I think a lot of us, when it comes to emotions, spend our time categorizing and judging emotion.
Mm.
We find ourselves sifting through, is this good emotion? Is this bad emotion? Should I be feeling this? Should I not be feeling this?
Right.
Should you be feeling this? Should you not? And it leads people to do things that are very invalidating. Like, uh, I'm sure you've been upset before at some point in your life, Sarah, and you've had someone come to you that said, now just calm down. Well, I don't know about you, but for me,
It didn't work.
that does not feel very good at all.
Oh.
Because it's not acknowledging that, hey, you're having a very normal human experience. You're feeling something, and in this case,
Yeah.
you're feeling upset. Maybe you're feeling angry. Maybe you're feeling irritated or disgusted or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of categorizing and judging emotion for ourselves and others, I think we get a lot further when we simply observe and label. When we can notice within ourselves, my stomach feels like it's just got butterflies in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm clenching my teeth and my heart rate is up. My palms are all sweaty. I think I'm having an anxiety response.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when we observe that and we say, interesting, what's going on here? Well, I think we have a lot more control over the situation when
Mm-hmm.
we're sitting with emotion and observing it in that manner, or when we're talking to somebody that we're with, whether it's a family member, friend, or even
Mm-hmm.
someone we just met, and we're saying things like, you seem frustrated. Would it help to talk about it? That's very different than saying, now just cool it, just calm down.
Right.
So that shift toward just allowing people to have that human physiological experience
Mm-hmm.
makes such a difference in how we feel, how we experience these things, and how we move through them.
I really appreciate you talking about finding the language to be able to say rather than stuff, stuff, stuff. I'm not going to acknowledge it at all. I'm just going to move on. And finding that place, the body does keep score. And so finding that place to be able to say, I feel this is very, very different than I am. And so the I am is much more of the shame thing. The I feel is much more of the guilt thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so coming to those places of saying, okay, I am experiencing, but if we're able then to let the emotion be the signal, it doesn't need to be the end all, but it's a signal to be able to look at what is it that's out of balance. And for me, so often coming to that space of my targets, my goals, my beliefs, there's something here that is being challenged. And so, what is it that's being challenged? If I can look at that and know what it is and see the challenge of it, I'm so much better off than if I just say, oh, I don't feel that, or oh, I'm not going to engage with that at all. It takes a little bit more time and effort and work on my part, but the long-term effect for me is that I'm not stubbing my toe all the time against the same thing by acknowledging it and seeing and making that extra step of saying, what is it that's in my belief system or that a target or a goal that I have that seems to be challenged?
Yeah, I think what you're sharing is powerful on a lot of levels. That when we develop language for these things, when we develop skills, then we're able to be a little bit more balanced. I think sometimes what we miss is understanding the physiology of it too.
Yes.
It's possible to overthink some of these things. So, quick example: sometimes in the morning, as we're kind of getting ready for the day and moving forward, sometimes my wife will just feel grumpy and out of the blue for no good reason. She'll just have negative thoughts and she'll feel frustrated. And she's really good about saying, Eric, I just feel kind of irritated right now. I'm just, everything is like a trigger. And it would be easy to overthink that. But if you look at it in terms of what is this a symptom of? Well, we know for her that that's a symptom that she's hangry. And women are very different than men physiologically.
Right.
Um, And one of the things that we know about women is that most women do better if they get 30 grams or so of protein right out of the gate. My wife is certainly one of those women that when she has symptoms like that, literally within 5 minutes of starting to eat some scrambled eggs or get some food in her, the
Yeah.
symptom just goes away and she doesn't experience it. Things that were bothering her before simply don't,
Right.
because her brain is producing better energy, her sugars have leveled out, things are feeling better. And
Yes.
I'm not suggesting that that's the answer for everyone in a situation like that, but if we can learn to balance out the soft skills that are so critical that you're talking about, finding those language and the words to use and understanding from a skills perspective how to handle things,
Mhm.
but also understanding the physiology, I think that's a dynamite combination for people that gives us a really effective way of moving forward and navigating what happens to all of us. We're all human. We all get life done. We all have some tough experience roller coaster ride, but that's as it should be. It's
Right.
our opportunity to learn.
And if we didn't have those opportunities, I think at some point we would become bored. Um, you know, the challenges do offer our brain the opportunity to be creative and decide, do we want to work through this as we have in the past, or do we want to take some of the skills that we've learned, some of the things that we've heard here, and add some of those pieces in and see if we can have a different outcome with it? And what an incredible opportunity that is. Hmm.
Absolutely.
Eric, I am so grateful for your generosity of time and your wisdom and your experience in sharing. Is there one piece that you'd like to reiterate for listeners to really hold on to from this conversation?
Mm. Yeah, thank you for asking. I think there's so much that can be impactful, but probably the most significant thing that I could say is not to confuse how you feel with who you are. Learn to recognize how you're feeling as a symptom. And it might be a great symptom. Maybe you feel really good, really dialed in, like things are just as sharp as possible. Maybe you don't. And it's very easy to confuse what is common with being normal. These days, obesity is common. These days, heart disease is common. These days, dementing illnesses like Alzheimer's are common. These days, it's very common as people get older that their memory gets worse, that their processing speed gets worse,
Mm.
that their ability to work with numbers and plan and reason and do all these different cognitive skills might decline. And people say things like, well, you are getting older. But we now know that although the brain slows a little bit once we get into our 30s, we should be able to maintain really good cognitive function right to the end of life. And if we're not, it's a symptom. So I think when we appreciate that and
Mm.
we can really pay attention to how we're functioning from day to day, it moves us in the direction of finding answers, starting to make choices a little bit differently, and leaving the sick care system that's very reactive and instead focusing on being well and reaping the joy and the benefits of living
Mm.
a life where we are physiologically and mentally and socially well to the degree that we can make choices that move us in that direction.
Mm. Oh, so good. Eric, I hope that we can have further conversations in the future. This has just been so empowering for me, and I know for our audience as well. Thank you, friend.
You're welcome anytime.
Beautiful. And to the audience, we say thank you for listening to the very end to soak in all of this wisdom. And I know that you, if you have come into this with an open heart, are also feeling that space of having hope, that there are things that we can do today to make a difference, not just for how we feel today and tomorrow, but also for our future. And so until next time, take good care of you.